For the future of the Earth will be of service, nya? 地球の未来にご奉仕するにゃん?
Hi YouTube! Today I'm customizing my Imomo doll into my favorite character of all time, Mew Ichigo. And especially, I'm collaborating with Lucia's Strange Universe to make our favorite characters. So Mew Ichigo, or Ichigo Momomiya, is the main character from Tokyo Mew Mew, which is a series very dear to me. I remember back when I first saw Mew Mew Power, how I begged my dad to go on the internet and get all the pictures I can and copy and pasting them into a Word document. Even my dad remembers it, and he usually doesn't have that much interest in my hobbies, but when I was working on the doll, he just said, yeah, I remember the Mew Mew stuff. Anyway, Tokyo Mew Mew led me to anime and DeviantArt and even YouTube. And I even wanted to cut and dye my hair red like Ichigo's at one point. So you can see I have a very strong attachment to the series. And thanks to the dolls from Mini Culture last year, which I mentioned in my end of year PJD tag video, I was inspired to make Ichigo. And even though I technically have a few Ichigo dolls, more can't hurt. So let's go! So first off, I'm going to start with the wig. And by the way, sorry for the messy background. I have a lot of projects going on at the same time and it's all chaos. Okay, so I made two wig caps. One made of a white lycra and one made of a soft tulle. The lycra one is to protect the head from staining, and the soft tulle was obviously for the wig itself. So I sewed the elastic onto the wig with a zigzag stitch on my sewing machine, and then I start adding my wefts with a whip stitch. So I started with the wig because I was afraid that I wouldn't have enough wefts for the head. So I wanted to leave myself some time in case I needed to buy more. It was enough in the end, and for those interested, it was 2 meters. So I whip stitched around the head with my first weft, which was, by the way, shorter, mainly because I didn't want to waste hair when I cut it. So since she has a short hairstyle, I used the shorter wefts on the base of her neck and her forehead and everything. And after a point I attached a few more wefts of the shorter hair at the back to fill out space. So my camera battery died and I didn't notice, but after I finished up to the top, I took the leftover from my wefts and basically sewed it onto itself to make a circle, and then I sewed that onto my wig, and well, I used a flat iron to iron it flat. I don't like using boiling water method on wigs because the boiling water has a tendency to destroy the elastic. So yeah. Next up was the stand. I got the stand arm online and I made the base with an acrylic sheet. So I used a simple heart shape as the shape of the base, and cut that out of acrylic. Next, I wanted to be a bit fancy, and following Moonlight Jewel's example, I cut some vinyl in the shape of Ichigo's Mew mark and put that onto my acrylic sheet before carving a hole for my stand arm. Next up, I did the eyes. I did the eyes first before the face so I can get a feel for the face. So I originally started with glass cabochons with a follow me eyes method, but I didn't like the shadow it cast, so I went with another method. I do some circles out of paper and cut them out and fit them into the eye to have a more or less figure out how I want my eye to be, how big it needs to be and how far away from the eye rail. And when I got a satisfying size, I started drawing the eyes. So when drawing the eyes, I went for Satoshi Ishino's art style. He was one of the animation studios that did some of the episodes of Tokyo Mew Mew, and well, Tokyo Mew Mew knew. So it might have been better to go with the original art style, but as shown by this screenshot, this is still my favorite visual in the series, so I'm going with Satoshi Ishino's style. So after that, I took my half sphere molds, added a tiny bit of resin to it, UV resin, and placed my eye in it. After I painted the back of my paper white so that the colors doesn't dull because it gets wet in the resin. And after that is cured, I mix some white pigment with my UV resin and pour that on top and filling the mold, and that's that. Just so you know, you have to make absolutely sure that your UV lights gets everywhere. I almost ruined my eyes and I had huge bubbles. I drilled open the bubbles and refilled them with resin to fix them. So yeah, I guess that takes a lot of practice. So after the eyes was done, I can move on to her face. So I took a picture of her face and printed it out and practiced my face up on paper, because I wanted to know exactly what I wanted for her face and how to make it look like the character. So this is also the first time I'm using MSC, and I can say it definitely helps with vinyl faces. I've had so many issues trying to paint vinyl heads that I pretty much gave up because I couldn't find a proper sealant. So I wish I had more. So after a few layers of MSC, I start with my face up. So firstly, I'm using my brown watercolor pencils to start with the eyelashes and eyelid lines. I use my paper face up as a reference all the way, and I use a mirror to check symmetry. and I'm constantly sharpening my pencil to make sure that everything is crisp. Although it can be a bit of a struggle. And after that I used some pink and started shaping my eyebrows. So I erased quite a bit, and if you're not careful you rub off the sealant, or if you're not careful with a pencil you stain your sealant. So while MSC is very potent, it's kind of easy to make mistakes. Well, it's a bit of a learning curve for now. I also added a bit of pink to the lip line to define her smile, before sealing my progress when I'm happy with it. On my new layer, I darkened some colors like the eyelid creases and eyebrows and lips, and then I go with black onto my eyelashes as well as a dark pink, trying to blend them into each other for a gradient. And at the same time I'm also adding some blush around the cheeks, lips and eyelids. My third layer is pretty much just continuing to darken all the colors. So while I had the MSC out and I was busy with the face up, I brought out her body and decided to make a Mew mark on her thigh. Now, I kind of regret how I did it because I ended up kind of breaking one of the joints. It's kind of fixed, but I know, and now you know, and I didn't want to do that. Anyway, I sealed her thigh, mixed up a bit of light pink paint, well, mixed up the paint and used watercolor pencil to sketch it on, and then painted it on and sealed again. So for the next layer of the face up, I'm adding some paint for some details, like white around the eyes, well, the eye holes. I wanted to try adding lighter color lashes to her eyelashes to make some of them stand out more, That didn't really work, so I dulled that back down with pencil again. And when I was happy, I took out my iridescent pearl powders and covered her face in that before giving her a final seal. Next up was the ears and tail. So for the ears, I followed a tutorial from Kimpatsu Cosplay on how to do no-sew ears. And instead of wrapping the wires around the headband, I wrapped it around a magnet and glued 2 pieces of fabric to glue the magnet in place. So the magnet will allow the ears to attach to her head magnetically. And I glued the other magnets on the head cap after putting it on her head, and well, after gauging where the magnets are supposed to go. I could have probably glued something on top to keep it there, but they seemed pretty sturdy enough for me. So for the tail, I used armature wire and bent the front, well, bent it in half and bent the front into a hook-ish type shape that I usually use when I make detachable tails and stuff, and then twisting the wires together at the back to form the base for the tail. And after that was formed, I just took a long strip of black faux fur and glued the armature wire onto the faux fur and wrapping it up and nice and neat. And that's it. Simple. Next up, I made the strawberry bell. So for the main strawberry bell, I found a file on Thingiverse, I'll link it in the description, which my brother printed it out for me. So we had to print it twice since I got the measurements wrong the first time. But other than that, it worked out perfectly. But I wanted to also make the upgraded version of the strawberry bell. So I got out my polymer clay and I got out a printed pattern, well, a printed screenshot of the strawberry bell's upgraded form, and I cut that out and cut it out of my clay and went to work. And since I wanted to be able to switch between the upgraded form and the normal form of the strawberry bell, I got me some itty bitty magnets. And I carved holes in all my pieces and put the magnets inside and poof, they work. Next up was the painting. I used mostly acrylic paints, but for the metallics I used my pearl powders mixed with my gloss. Anyway, if not for the fact that I was off screen most of the time, you'd probably enjoy this part more, so sorry about that. So for the last part of the strawberry bell, it was the handle. You know, the strawberry or heart-shaped handle that Ichigo holds. So the file on Thingiverse had it as a bit thin, which is probably to accommodate for adding fur. Anyway, the fur would be too big for the scale, so I got a nice double-sided fleece. And honestly though, it was a bit difficult to find because my local fabric store moved and I was jumping around looking for a new fabric store, and this one didn't have the color and that one didn't have fleece. Yeah. Anyway, I glued the heart onto that and glued the main part of the strawberry bell onto that heart, and the strawberry bell was done. Next up, shoes. So I put it on some socks, stuffed the toes with some toilet paper, covered that up with a sheet of plastic and taped it together to protect the feet. Next I cut some cardboard soles and used some plastic to attach them to the feet, and I have a water and glue mixture which I'm going to use to add cloth strips to make a toe cap, similar to paper mache but not. So for the boots, I start making strips and gluing a cord into them so that I can make the line edge of the boot. And so I sew that along the edge of my boot pattern. Next I'm going to sew my lining on top of that and trim all the corners for a neat finish. And then I press the seams. Then I'm sewing that boot pieces to the toe caps. And then I'm temporarily pinning them on the foot so I can sew in the zipper. So this is my first time putting a zipper into a boot, so I'm pretty excited about that. And here I am putting a lining inside my shoe base. Carefully cutting the excess fabric and gluing around the edge. So now I'm going to add the tongue, although it's just a tiny piece at the top. And now I'm going to use some embroidery thread to make the stitches in the boot. So for those interested, in the manga, the edge around the boot is actually a fur edge. It took me this many years to figure that out when I actually took a good look. Although I understand why it's not that like that in the anime, I'm surprised it took me this long to find it out. But I'm kinda glad, because having a fur edge on your shoes like that is a bit weird to me. Although fur on other parts of a boot seems okay. Anyway, I slowly try and make my stitches. Unfortunately, because of the fabric, I can't really make any marks, otherwise it's there and there to stay. So I am very careful in making my stitches and sewing the shoe together. Now I'm putting the shoes on her feet and zipping up the zippers. It was quite a struggle to do the zippers because, as you can see here, the lining gets stuck in the zipper, so I had to take it apart and redo it. Then I put the shoe bases on and then use a contact adhesive to attach the toe of the boot to the toe cap. Unfortunately, I couldn't get all of the lumps and bumps out, but I got most of them out, and I'm pretty proud of how these turned out in the end. Excuse the dog. And off screen I made some shoe soles from polymer clay. Unfortunately that was a bit of a mess because it's red and red polymer clay gets everything red, and red polymer clay has a tendency to dry up and be useless, so it took forever to condition, and that just made everything get stained red even more. I'm still in the market for some pinking shears, so if I find some, hopefully my next pair of shoes will go easier when gluing the edges of the boot to this inner sole. You can see I'm trying a wide variety of things to try and get it to work properly. And the poor doll is face down on my work table, which isn't the cleanest place. And I was hoping her weight would help those pieces stay flat. Anyway, so I glued the soles on. That's the shoes. So for the tail bow, I had my pattern and I folded over and glued the edges off screen. Now I'm gluing the front and back pieces together, as well as gluing together my glove cuffs thingies. Then I'm gluing the tiny bow that goes onto one of the gloves. And using a clothesline pin to keep it in place. And then I start sewing the tail bow together. So this is unfortunately the very fragile PU fabric, polyurethane fabric, that has a tendency to disintegrate with age. I didn't know that when I bought it, and I had to well, for doll size any bit is quite a bit, So I have it and I should use it. Also, I never mentioned with the strawberry bell that, well, I made a mold of the heart that goes in the center and then made that with pigmented resin, and yeah, so it's a bit nicer looking than the original 3D printed thing. So for my tail bow, the next thing, I cut a slit into the bow and then I take my bell and attach that. Now my bell was originally silver, which I painted gold, and while painting it gold there was an accident and I had to clean it up with my rubbing alcohol and the sound changed. But yeah, even after a few days it didn't sound as nice anymore, and suddenly when I put it all together it sounded nice again. So I'm not sure what happened. Anyway, after sewing on the bell, I sew on the strap that's going to attach the bow to the tail. And I'm going to use a snap as a closure for that. I used my smaller Mew Ichigo doll, her weapon, as a base to make a heart, which will go on the glove. I made a mold and made the mold with resin and painted the edge gold, and then I'm going to glue it on the glove. And I glue the little bow onto the glove piece as well. Off screen I painted all of the white parts of red, and that helped a lot. Now, in my review video you saw how difficult it was to put her hands on. So I decided to file down the hand base things so that it's round, so it's easier to put the hands on. And then I also carved out a bit of the vinyl inside the hands. After that, I took some red dye and I dyed the hands red. Although at first I didn't dye them properly and they had a bit of excess dye, so I threw them to boil in a clean water, and that helped. So for underwear I was off screen most of the time, sorry, but it's pretty simple. Just hem the edges, sew the two sides together, and then add the elastic with a zigzag stitch while folding over the edge for the top. And that's the undies. Next up, the skirt. So I have 3 pieces and my waistband gets folded in half and sewed up on the sides. And my main fabric piece gets a gathering stitch on the top and the bottom. And I first gather at the bottom to the same length as the lining piece. Originally I wanted to use the same kind of polyurethane fabric, since in the anime the girls' outfits are kind of stiff, so I thought a material like that would work, but no light pink in my country, so I decided to go with the satin. And then I coincidentally found this beautiful sheer iridescent fabric, which I decided to overlay with my satin. and I think it's worthy of Magical Girl's outfit. So the bottom I gathered to the size of the lining. I sewed, and now I'm sewing up the side seams to a certain point, just so that I have enough of an opening for it to go through the doll, over the doll's butt. And that's unfortunately off screen. And it's kind of hard to try and explain it in person without seeing it, so I'm terribly sorry about that. And now I wanted to sew up the edge I left open on the inside, but I ended up creating an infinity loop. So I took out those stitches and left it till later. And cat assistant. Stand by. So here you can see my infinity loop. Oh, kind of see it. Anyway, I took that out, and now I gather the top edge of the skirt to the same length as the lining, and use the basting stitch to attach them together. And once again, I'm terribly sorry for going halfway out of the camera. I guess I somehow adjusted my camera setup without knowing. And after sewing my lining and my main fabric together with a basting stitch, I'm going to attach and sew on the waistband. And I'm going to sew a snap onto the waistband for a closure. Oh, and the raw edge at the back, yeah, I just folded it over and sewed it so that it was a nice finish. It might have been more aesthetically pleasing if I did a ladder stitch or a hidden stitch, but at that time I couldn't be bothered. So next up is the most difficult piece, her bodice or top. So I pin them together piece by piece and sew them together and paste the seams. Now it's better to go one by one rather than doing several at a time, so that you can properly paste the seams, since this is a very finicky process. I actually went and accidentally ruined my first version, so be careful. Well, I ruined my first version because I melted my fabric when I was pressing the seams. So be careful for that too. and I made yarn wefts, well, the same way as you usually do, tying yarn to a coat hanger and brushing it out. And I made a lining just as I made my fabric, and now I'm going to be carefully gluing bit by bit some of my yarn onto the top of my bodice. So in a lot of designs, or a lot of, well, all the Tokyo Mew Mew dolls, they decided to use lace for the red edges, but when you watch the anime, it's so obviously fur. Well, I get that, well, so there's a 1/6 scale dolls and a 1/12 scale dolls, and I'm not sure the scale of the Italian dolls, but it's more or less 1/6. So yeah, I guess a fur term in that side is probably impossible. So yeah, but I see cosplayers mostly using lace or just a strip of fabric, which is kind of disappointing. But now I am doing it right. Not really, I'm doing it like I want to. Anyway, after that was left to dry, I carefully peel off the paper and then trim off the excess, because fabric glue can get quite bulky. And now I'm pinning my lining to my fabric, and I'm going to be sewing the top edge. Just take care when you're pinning it in place, because it can get messy quite quickly if you're not paying attention where you're sewing. It's like I had to seam up a few times to get it right. And anyway, then I clip corners and turn it inside out after I sewed. So off camera I did the same with the bottom, and then I sewed in a zipper at the back and trimmed my fur. Unfortunately it was off screen because I was struggling. Sorry. So for the choker, sleeves and garter, I have mainly rectangles, and for the sleeves and garter I zigzag stitch an elastic to my lining. Then, like the top, I add my yarn to the pieces, and then I sew them together top to top and bottom to bottom. But for the sleeves, I first gather my fabric before I pin and sew them on. And after sewing the tops and bottoms, I turn everything inside out, with a lot of effort because the fur takes up a lot of space. And then I ended up doing that off screen and pressing the seams. And for the garter and sleeves, I just sew up the open edge, and for the choker I fold over and sew the edges before sewing on my pendant, which I made from polymer clay off screen. I did a lot of things off screen, didn't I? And the final part, styling the wig, because the wig is a bit too small and I can't easily put it on and take it off her head, so it's staying on forever now. Also, I added a bit of masking tape to her neck peg, which really helped with the loose head. So because her wig is tight, I'm going to pin it to my wig cap so that the alignment of the magnets is in place when I put it on her head. So when it comes to styling her head, I put her ears on so I can figure out the placement of how I want the hair to be. And I section off my hair with some clips, at least first in the front anyway. After sectioning the front hair, I use some thinning shears to trim her hair. Although I bought a very cheap, crappy one that takes forever to cut things, I work slowly and brush everything out and trim off all the flyaways with my tiny fade scissors. And all throughout the hairstyling, I use my hair straightener and water glue to style the hair. So water glue is sometimes called paper glue, and it's just a clear glue that literally washes off with water. So it's a very nice non-permanent way of styling doll's hair. And when used with the straightener, it is pretty convenient. After the bangs, I move on to pretty much all of the shorter wefts at the bottom of the head to make sure they curl the right direction. And I didn't mention this before, but in between making the wig and now, I had several panic attacks of it's not the right color, it's not the right color, and well, I did a lot of things, and including trying to dye the wig a bit darker or a bit more pinker anyway, and getting new wefts. So the wig was a tiny bit better after the dye, and getting new wefts, well, I couldn't find the right color. So yeah, anyway, after the doll was done, she was perfect, so useless panicking. Anyway, so while you watch me style the hair and this project gets close to being finished, and this video is almost an hour long, sorry about that. I hope you enjoy watching anyway. But thanks for being with me, and honestly, I was kind of wondering about my life decisions a few times during the project, but in the end it turned out nicely, and I absolutely love how she turned out. So I hope you enjoy watching and enjoy the pictures afterwards. So thanks for being here anyway. Oh, by the way, remember to go watch my Collab partner's doll video as well. And bye bye.